Many customers we talk to know they need database auditing, but they don't know how to secure database with. So, how do you secure database with Power? Let me walk you through the concepts. I like to compare database auditing to a glove. It needs to be comfortable, not too tight and not too loose. Too tight means you get a lot of alerts, a lot of false positives, very long reports. It's too tight and unusable. Too loose means that nothing you do in the database will generate an alert. And you could have a data breach and you wouldn't know about it. So it's too loose and useless. To make this comfortable cloud, we need to tailor it to the activity of our database. Every database activity is different, so we need to tailor the implementation to a particular database. So, how do we do it? There are three core types of capabilities at our disposal: declarative auditing, memory analysis, and proactive forensics. These are part of level 2 and 3 in Core. Core Audit has more capabilities, like discovery, metadata snapshots, before and after values, SQL blocking, dynamic masking, and more. But the importance of those is to complement the core capabilities. In other words, if you use the core capabilities of declarative auditing, anomaly analysis, and proactive forensics, you'll have a good security posture. Even if you use some of them, you'll be in a good place. But if you don't use any of them, you will not be in a good place. When I come to a new customer, I usually go to proactive forensics first. So I think that's a good place to start. When I say forensics, most people think about reactive forensics. Reacting to security event. The data breach, something happened and you want to know more. You want more details. This is reactive. Proactive forensics is similar in the sense that we're looking at the database activity, but we have different goals. We're trying to understand the database activity and what's going on inside. There are several reasons to do this. First, it allows us to design controls. That's why we'll start there. Come to a customer, I don't know the environment, I want to understand what's going on. Using proactive forensics, I can understand the environment, I can understand the activity, and how to tailor auditing to it. Second, if we do it regularly, it allows us to identify gaps in our controls. Database activity changes over time, so we need to be aware of it, and proactive forensics is a good way to do it. Third, it allows us to identify bad security practices. For example, people sharing machines, people sharing accounts, DBAs dumping tables into spreadsheets, all sorts of things like that pop out very easily in proactive forensics. Obviously, it also allows us to identify suspicious activity, attacks, and so on. And it's a good compensating control to the other controls we're going to talk about. These methods are also part of how we quantify false negatives. It's a big problem in security that nobody talks about, but also the subject for different people. So how do we do proactive forensics? The idea is to use a collection of textual and graphical tools to identify what's going on in the database. For example, you can look at the list of users, programs, and IPs to see who's running activity in our database. You can also look at the relationship between them. So, which users use which programs coming from which IPs. Or in a different order, first break it down by programs and then by users. We can look at these relationships with volume. For example, how many cycles, how many rows. And again, we can break it down by users, by programs, by IPs, in a different order, and so on. We can look at cross relationships. Or we can look at this as a network of connections. We can break down this activity over time. For example, by users, by programs, and so on. We can look at the ratios between the number of cycles and the number of rows. That can highlight data extractions. A lot of rows, a small number of cycles, potential data extraction. So far, we looked at who's running activity in our database. We can also look at what's happening inside it. So, who's running, what SQL constructs, what commands, and so on. For example, who touched the salary table in the last week? Or what did Tom do with SQL Plus? The point is that if you're curious about what's happening inside your database, you can find answers to a lot of your questions. When you start looking at declarative auditing, you'll see many of the questions that you need to have answers for. But if nothing else, you must have some idea of who's running activity inside your database and what they're doing. It's impossible to secure a database without it. I'm a curious person, so proactive forensics is one of my first go-tos. When opening to new customers, I'm many times surprised to see how little they know about what's happening inside their critical production databases. And at the same time, it's not really surprising because they never had the tool to find it. In the next video, we'll talk about declarative auditing and anomaly analysis. What are the types of controls to help us secure our systems? If you have comments or want to know more, email me or leave a message in the comments.